everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. If you'd like to join us live, you'll find the schedule in our monthly newsletter and on my website at lindanickell.com/happiness hour. Tonight's guest is Andrew Collett. Andrew is a fine art landscape photographer based in Muskoka. Did I say it right? In Muskoka,
Sure.
Ontario. His work is exhibited in galleries and collected worldwide. He also owns Print Partner, a fine art printing company in Toronto specializing in large format prints. As an educator and a workshop leader, Andrew is committed to helping photographers elevate their craft. In tonight's presentation, Learning to See Photographically, Unlocking the Secrets of Depth and Presence in Landscape Photography. This session will focus on the elusive quality of depth in landscape photography, the sense of being there, and how to harness light, composition, and atmosphere to achieve it. You can connect with Andrew through his website at andrewcollett.com. And if you're on Instagram, you can find him at Andrew D. Collett, and I will link his socials in the show notes below. Welcome to the Happiness Hour, Andrew.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy talking about the art of photography, and and I think it's important that you get I share some perspective as to the lens that I'm sort of coming from, because 20 years ago I made a big career decision, and that was to quit my high-paying full-time job and in Bermuda, of all places, and to move back to Canada, Ontario, where I was from, and follow my passion for photography. The thing was, you'd say, well, why would you leave Bermuda? Well, I was there on a work permit. I'm not Bermudian. And so at some point I was going to have to go, and I wanted to go on my terms. And but the crazy thing was, I was not a photographer. I was not an artist. I was a business person, someone in marketing and sales. I happened to be in the furnishing side of business, hospitality and office and that. And so I had a little exposure to we'll call it decorating, if you will. But my passion was photography, and it was becoming more important to me that I find a way to follow that. As I kind of told my friends jokingly at first, was I want to find a way to get paid to paddle my canoe around Algonquin Park. And that's a kind of a famous park up where I live now. And that just sounded like some kind of crazy dream. And I remember my parents reminding me that I had two children to feed and like a wife at home, and I was like, yeah, I know, but this is important to me. And I really got a wake up call in the first year a bit of doing this. I was okay as a photographer. I was good enough, but I really didn't understand the business. And when I went into, I thought of different avenues I could go. I certainly didn't want to go into commercial photography. Just it didn't inspire me. I wanted to do what I love. And I always believe if you do what you love, everything will fall into place, right? Like one thing you'll learn if you want to take nature photography seriously is it's an endless amount of work. It just never stops. And what I mean by that is your quest for perfection, that's what it has to be. You can't settle for showing up and shooting and it's okay. Because if you're going to be a fine art photographer, what you're doing is you're selling your artwork. You're selling your photography as artwork. And so that creates a whole new set of problems. And I mean, like it used to be a big deal. It's not as much now. But when I decided that I wanted to be a fine art photographer and basically sell my photos as artwork, it was very different than being a stock photographer. It was very different than being a commercial photographer, because what you needed to do was the emphasis had to be on quality. And the thing is, when a lot of photographers get started, they think, okay, I'm going to, take some nice photos, make them 8x10, put them in a standard frame that's cheap to buy. And they go up and they show up at their art show and they're wondering why they only sold a few $100s. And it's because when you choose to go take art, to choose to do photography as art, you need to create art that people need to buy, will buy. And so you need to create it at a size that they can use, right? And so that was the first lesson I learned was really I was shooting too small format. I was shooting kind of not thinking about where my photographs, where people who are buying my photographs are going to put them. Over the sofa is a really popular spot. You can't put an 8x10 over a sofa, right? So I'm going to need to create big images, like big, 3 feet by 4 feet. That's kind of my best-selling size around that. Oh my goodness, 3 feet by 4 feet. Okay. Well, what does that mean? It means everything has to be perfect. It means all the good is going to be really good because it's nice and big. All the bad is going to be really bad because it's nice and big too. And so it really drives you to be a perfectionist in technique, to be a perfectionist in composition, to be a perfectionist in every aspect of the craft. And my goal is always to try to turn the ordinary, especially the nature photographer, turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. Now, I do not travel to shoot. I'm not trophy hunting. I don't want another Arches shot from wherever, it's just, or Yosemite. Sure, I want to do that for my own pleasure and my experience. But what I want to do is really deeply connect with my subject matter. And my subject matter, that requires a lot of time. To deeply connect with your subject, it requires years to uncover how it wants to be photographed, how best to shoot it, what lenses, what lighting, what time of year, what atmosphere is it really at its best. And to get to know a subject that well, you have to spend a lot of time there. And so my approach was always about finding a few spots that resonated to me emotionally, personally, that I connected with, that I felt empowered by when I went there. And that's different for everybody, but I'm sure we all have our favorite locations that we like. And really learn to understand that. Spend the time in nature, spend the time in the wilderness, and see it at its best, at its worst. See it on a cloudy day and on a sunny day, in the spring and winter and fall and summer, and really start to connect with what it's trying to say to me. And I know that sounds existential, but it's the truth. If you want to create images that stop people and they go, "Oh, what is that?" Like that's my backyard. How did you? And so I'm very regional in a lot of my photographs are very regional. They're here in Ontario, but they're kind of Canadian. They're not the Rocky Mountains. They're the woods. They're the swamps and trees and some of our lakes. And for people who in this area, I wanted them to just resonate with that feeling of like I've been there. Like even though they haven't, maybe that's familiar to me. And so what my goal is always turn the extraordinary, and I guess the first comment I'll make here is, how do we turn the ordinary into the extraordinary? So let me start with I'm going to show some images soon, okay? But I have a lot of swamps, and we have a lot of dead trees, and we have a lot of messy woods and forests, and a lot of uninteresting nature until you start to kind of bring it down and you start to isolate certain areas. There's always that, what's the most interesting thing happening here now? Okay. And so I always ask myself that question. So, I come to let's say I come to a bog and or a swamp or whatever, the edge of a lake, and I'll be like, okay, what's the most interesting thing here? And I'll look for composition elements. I'll look for subject matter, and then I try to envision what it would look like at certain times of day in lighting and atmosphere. And once I can do that, then I can say, yeah, there's a really great foundation here for a good image from a composition standpoint. Now, what I need to do is wrap it in the right light and atmosphere. So, a lot of times when I'm out shooting, I'll be scouting and I'll be looking for my compositions first. So, and then I'll be looking for thinking about light and atmosphere for that, and then being able to go back until I get what I want. Other times you stumble upon atmosphere and light, and you're like, bloody hell, this is perfect. And it's like, forget it. We're just going to make this work. So I think what I want to do is let me start there, and I'm going to share my screen. Now, hopefully not have too many technical difficulties. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a variety of images, and I'm going to talk about sort of the story behind them, the artistic decisions I made about them. But I think let me just backtrack even further. I am going to show you what ends up happening with my. So I sell artwork, and what does that mean? Well, I do a lot of art shows. I sell to hotels. I sell to commercial embassies around Canadian embassies all around the world have my work, and I just want to show you what this looks like. So here's a booth from a recent show I did this Christmas in Toronto, and these are all 4 feet by 6 feet. The top prints. The bottom one's a little bit smaller. These are all on metal prints. They're all metal that I do now, and all printed in my own lab in Toronto, that print partner that I own. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense about what happens with what I mean by fine art photography. Okay. So fine art is shooting. For me, I'm shooting with our artistic intent, with technical perfection. And the goal is, and then through inspiring through light and atmosphere. And then the goal is to make them big and make them suitable for somebody to show on their in their living room or dining room or wherever it's going to be. So let me share with you now, go through the slideshow here, and we will start to talk about some of my images. So I like to start with this image because it's kind of how it all began for me. Where I live, it's woods, it's lakes, and trees. I mean, rocks, and that's it. And when I first came into Algonquin Park and started shooting, it was really difficult for me to capture that feeling, that mood. What is Algonquin Park, and how does it want to be shot? Is it wide angle? Is it telephoto? And what resonates with people? What do they like to see? And Algonquin's a very messy place. There's a lot of, the woods are messy, right? Like, it's nature. And so wide angle was a problem for a lot of locations there. And I started to play around with kind of mid-range telephoto lenses, and seeing about compressing distance and narrowing in and limiting my field of view, and making a nice tight compositions. And that started to work out well. I mean, it's hard to do that in nature, to find those little pockets of composition areas that work. Okay, where we can move the eye through the scene. And when I show up to the forest like this, and I want to shoot, I try to like imagine what my subconscious is reacting to. You'll notice as you look around, your eye will like gravitate to certain things, and there's a reason they gravitate. There's certain techniques, things that like light tone we gravitate to, certain colors we gravitate to, like reds and that. They'll just attract our attention. And what I started to realize was when I came upon this scene. This is called Forest of Dreams. This was kind of my first success in shooting in the woods in Algonquin Park. And I was hiking up the Booth Rock Trail, and I had actually set out for a sunrise that morning, but it was raining and foggy and misty, and I figured I'll go for a hike anyways. And as I got to the top of this trail, it just kind of stopped me. The mist was rolling in from the lake, and everything was just, it had that feeling, that enchanted forest feeling, that there's something special going on here. And I stopped, and I really, that question, there's something special happening. Okay, like, this is atmosphere. This is beautiful. New growth of the leaves. This was in May. And I said, well, problem is I have no like rule of thirds. I have no beginning, middle, end. I have no, like, how do I compose this scene? How do I move the eye? Because it's really about, when you're making large pieces of artwork, you need to hold the viewer's attention. How do you hold the attention? How do you draw them in? How do you move their eye through the scene? You see, that's the hard part, right? And especially when they're big prints. I mean, you better be able to do that, or you're spending a lot of money, and for people who are just walking by. But what I noticed with this one here, and I think it was a very important lesson for me, it was sort of how I layered tone And I noticed that in the back on the third there, you'll see in the back, there's like a dead tree with no bark on it. It's an old hemlock tree. That was just kind of catching my eye. It was like, I just realized I kept looking at that. And I was looking at it because it was a lighter tone and it was pulling my eye in. And when I realized that I can use that as sort of my background element to create that sense of depth in the scene, then I was able to find a way to wrap some composition around it, some new growth, a few other strong trees, and create a picture that really captures Algonquin on a rainy day. And it just kind of takes you into the forest. And one of the things you'll hear about with my photography is the names are very important to me, what I call them, because I like that to be kind of a reflection of the emotion of how I'm feeling. And I think as an artist, that's the most important part is that connection. And sometimes we get lucky and it means something to us as the artist, but it also means something to other people. Just because you like it doesn't mean everybody else is going to like it. I've learned that lesson. We all have our favorite photo that's going to blow up on whatever or sell like you, and nobody likes it but you. But that's okay. It's all part of the process. So this is Forest of Dreams, and I think when we shoot photographs, we're taking the 3D world and we're making it 2D, right? So that's just what happens. It's a photo on paper. It's a photo on the screen. It's two-dimensional. But we need to recreate that feeling of three dimensions in the image through use of composition, through use of lighting, and through atmosphere to create that immersive experience for the person looking at it. Okay, so I'm going to move on that note. What I want to show you is another photograph that once I shot Forest of Dreams and I understood, started to learn about how I can use tone and atmosphere, well, then I was off to the races. This one came next. Well, not next, but this one was this. Obviously, that was spring. This is winter. I did some photography in between. Can you guys see this okay? Okay, great. So this is called Winter Blues, and and for me, it's one of my all-time favorites. Whenever I do an art show, I like to bring this, and people always stop and say, "Is it a painting? What is that? Is it a picture?" And that's the kind of reaction I'm looking for. And I said, and they're like, "Well, what did you do? Is it photoshopped? Is it?" I'm like, "Have you ever been in the woods on a rainy day when the snow is melting?" And inevitably, a lot of people, not in Texas, but here in Ontario, will say, "Well, yeah." And I say, "You see, the mist that comes up off, that's when I shot this. There's really nothing to this other than atmosphere." And what I've been able to do here is I've been able to really take advantage of how tone recedes with mist. And so how it's darker and the closer to you, and then it gets lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes away. And so I've layered the tones of the trees in that way. So I wanted to be, and I also used with this, it was probably, I think it was about a 100 millimeter lens. So I've brought the distance in, I've compressed the scene, I've made it even more two-dimensional from a technical standpoint, but then through an artistic standpoint, and in the right atmosphere, I've been able to recreate that sense of depth. So this tends to draw people right in. And even though it's a 100 millimeter lens, it's all compressed and it still has that sense of depth to it, and certainly a lot of mood and atmosphere. And this piece is called Winter Blues, and it was a reflection of sort of a warm day in January that we had, and it was right after the holidays, and I actually, this was an interesting story because sometimes I'll photograph the image before I even get there. I photograph it in my head. And I think that comes when you really understand your location. You really start to understand your subject matter. You can pre-visualize what's going to happen. You can pre-visualize like, hey, I know these conditions that are happening right now, and I remember that spot. I think I could probably get this shot. So I was sitting in my chair and it was raining and it was mist, and I just said winter blues. That's what I was feeling. And I'm like, I know how to shoot this. Drove, it was an hour drive, put my snowshoes on, hiked in half an hour, whatever, not far, and shot this just like literally 2 takes, and it was done. And this has sold hundreds and hundreds of copies for me. But that was all pre-visualized, and that was all thinking about how I'm feeling about, and then how can I photograph that? How can I capture that in a photograph? And certainly it goes back to my point about taking time to learn. And we're going to talk a little bit more about working your location and learning it. It's really important. Okay. So let's have a look at another image here, which is quite interesting. So this is all about me trying to go beyond what people expect as a photograph. And I think for me, that's turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. This is a rock with some reeds in a lake, right? Any other day other than this day, that's all it is. I mean, maybe you get a nice sunset or sunrise, depending where it is. But this is really interesting because it was pouring rain, absolutely pouring rain. And I was on a workshop. I used to teach. I'm not running them right now because I'm fairly busy with my printing company. But I used to teach a lot, and I would take people out in the field, and we had to call that morning because it was raining so hard. And do you ever know that feeling like when you get like this creative itch? You're like, I need to shoot. I'm like ready to go. I don't care that it's raining. I'm like, I'm in the zone. I don't know what I want to shoot, but I need to go. So I went out and just went for a drive, and I drove down. This is right off a highway. It's not remote by any means. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw that rock. And it was just like, okay, what I've learned to do is if something catches my attention, I stop and I investigate. There's a reason it jumped out at me. Okay. So kind of go with your intuition a little bit. There's a reason that this talked to me. So when I got down to the shoreline, I'm looking at this and I'm going, it's pouring rain. I mean, like, what can I do? But I love the misty hills in the background. Again, we're looking at tone here, right? So this is not black and white. This is a color photograph. And so I'm thinking about the tonality. I'm thinking about the mood. I really enjoy music's really important to me. And this I was kind of in the back of my head. It's pouring rain. I'm like humming Gordon Lightfoot in the early morning rain. And I just said, that's like that melancholy song, that feeling. This is it. I can photograph that, but I didn't know how. So I started with a fast shutter speed. I thought maybe I'm going to capture the raindrops on the water. Um, but that kind of wasn't soft, melancholy, muted feeling. That was like busy and too distracting. So I did the opposite. And I took a density filter and probably a 6-stop density or something, and put it on my lens and slowed it right down. And then literally this was the piece, and it's called Morning Rain. And you can see the subtle rocks under the foreground, but really this is a study in tone, negative space, and using basically just kind of tone as composition. The rock and then the reeds just sort of walk you out into the lake, into the background. And this is quite a decent sized lake. So I've again compressed distance here to kind of bring that in. This was when I was learning about shooting in Algonquin, and I started to shoot a lot with the 50, 70 millimeter lens. Tended to create the more personal, intimate compositions. And so this is a lovely story to it as well, doesn't it? And an experience. And I think part of if you're selling your work as prints, as art, people can go buy decor anywhere. They can go to Walmart and buy $100 canvas print for over their sofa, can't they? But the reason they're going to buy from an artist, the reason they're going to buy from a photographer is because of that effort you make to connect to the subject, that you connect the story and you connect even as I said, my titles are really important. And I think that's what people want. They want to share that experience with people that come to their homes and, oh, look at this photograph I bought from so and so, and let me tell you the story about what happened. And it's no longer, it's more than just decor for the wall then, isn't it? And that's really what we want to try to do. So let's move on here, and we're going to look at I think what I'll do is I'm going to show you another video, and I want to excuse me, I want to kind of show, this is a video of me in the field. And what I want to go back to and touch on is like working your location. I mean, there's a few spots when you find composition gold, okay? Like composition is the hardest part out there in nature. Like it's not everywhere. Sure, everywhere there's a tree, everywhere there's a lake, there's something to shoot, but not all of them are good compositions. Not all of them have, you can't turn every subject into something extraordinary. Maybe the light doesn't line up or the atmosphere is never going to line up. Okay. So when you find photographic gold, you mine it and you just do it over and over again, and it will just pay. So I'm gonna show you a few locations now, and explain the importance of that. And this is one of the reasons I don't have to travel a lot, because I can find my locations fairly nearby and then just really work them. So let me show you this one. This is again in Algonquin. I shoot mainly Algonquin Park and Lake Superior, and then of course Muskoka, where I'm from. That's kind of it's within a 1,000 kilometer radius of where I live, sort of around that area. Not too far. Okay, so let me just show you this. So this is me in the field at a swamp. Okay, but you're going to see the images that come from this. It's awesome. Okay. Okay, guys, here's another idea for composition. You'll see on my camera here that I've zoomed in. One of the things that I'm using is there's sort of a channel between the lily pads in the foreground that kind of S-shapes through the scene. I'm not sure if you can pick that up very well on there. But to me, that's kind of cool. That leads the eye into the scene, gives us a little bit of visual interest, a little bit of foreground, a little more, adds a little more of a dynamic element to the composition. Nice visual rhythm. So I'm going to do this shot as well too, for sure. So we're still thinking about, how the eye moves through the scene, always thinking, what is the shape of the forms that we have, the objects that we're photographing, and how do they help move the eye through the scene. Okay. So let's look at the picture from there. It's kind of it's not that exact one, but it's from that shoot. It's just a slightly different composition I ended up going with, but I want to show you this. Okay. So one thing, when you're at a location like that, what do you shoot, right? Like, okay, this all looks beautiful. You can't just shoot the whole thing. I mean, you're not going to have any focus. You're not going to have any. There's going to be nothing you're conveying with your image other than just a snapshot of a big area. And so for me, the way I like to do that is I showed you in the and you'll see. I guess it'll be in the next image. How I'll start to think about. Okay, so I've got all these mist colored trees. This is great. And then I'll start thinking about, well, what isn't important in this scene? And one of the things that wasn't important was the sky. I mean, it was just great. It was nothing interesting there at all. Okay, so we're going to cut the sky out. All right, so now I've got these flat two-dimensional trees. How do I create that sort of depth? And so you heard me talk about the rhythm. You can see that a little, the rhythm of the ribbon, I meant ribbon, of the foreground and the way that the swamp sort of meandered in. Okay, so I used that for one shot. That's great. And what I also did on here was I sort of layered the rhythm, the lily pads in the foreground, the reeds in the midground, and then these kind of spooky trees in the background. And this really created a interesting mood for me. It's one of the things when you sell your photography as art, you sort of have to keep an eye on trends a little bit. And you want to sort of have enough kind of variety that that will appeal to 80% of the market. So one thing right now, these kind of up here, these sort of tones. This is not black and white. It's not color. I've desaturated a bit, but I left a little bit of the teals in there, a little bit of the brownish colors, and then lots of course, gray. And this is a palette that really is appealing to people right now for some reason. I'm a color guy, I like bright colors, but so I shot this knowing that, but this is just the first of, to me, what I know was to come next. And what was going to come next is over the hill in the background there. I know the lights. This is where it's so important to know your location. I know the sun's coming up back there. Okay. I also know from experience here that those trees are going to get backlit and they're covered in dew and they're wet. They are going to sparkle. I mean, it literally is going to light up like a Christmas tree. So it takes about 45 minutes from this shot. So I just wait. And it's absolutely a phenomenon that is unbelievable. And this is what you get 45 minutes later. And this was the shot I was after. Okay. So that one I talked about in the camera where I said I used the the ribbon of the water of that little trail in there to lead the eye in. So this is to me wonderful. Okay, this is just what I hoped. But the first one, Soul sells fine. Not quite as well as this, but people like that sort of muted palette. This is more in your face. It's bright. It's golden. It's warm tones from the light and it's blue tones from the shadows. That's really important to think about is complementary colors like that. Especially if you're shooting for art, people like that. Everything from like people like warmer tones usually as well in their decor and when they're decorating. So you sort of think about that a bit too. Blue images just don't sell as well as warm tones. It's harder for people to decorate around that. And so you can see the ideas here with the backlighting on the wet trees. So, that's just gold. After rain, whenever you can get that, if you have mist and fog, you want to go out and shoot into that light. Technically, it's very difficult to shoot backlighting, but you have to watch for flare, and sometimes it depends a little bit on the quality of your lens and equipment you're using. But I mean, I've had my lens hood on, of course, but I've also been known to take my hat off and I'll put it even on top of the lens, anything I can do to help prevent that flare. That flare is just going to ruin contrast. It's going to be really hard to get rid of in post, and it's going to ruin a print for the most part. Okay. So, I mean, this is a great example of find your location like this. And I mean, there's so much to shoot in literally 200 feet of swamp area that I just go back here every year. And I'll show you another one from there, which is completely different. And so you're going to see three completely different images from the same place. Okay, so look at that one. So, right. I mean, I think there's a couple of spots where if you said, Andrew, you have to pick three spots you shoot for the rest of your life, this would be one of them. There's just so much to do here. I'll show you some other images that are sort of in this area that they're completely different as well too. But I think that's one of the things you want to challenge yourself. Well, why don't we move to that right now? You want to challenge yourself as an artist, photographers. You sort of don't want to get stuck in a rut, right? So there's times when you're like, gosh, I've been shooting a lot of like beginning, middle, end, grand landscapes, or I've been shooting a lot of whatever similar type of images. And you can get they kind of become low-hanging fruit, and they don't motivate you creatively anymore. And perhaps people are bored of looking at them, like my wife. So you want to give yourself little creative challenges each year. All right. So one of the challenges I said when I was going through one of those periods of like, I'm no longer inspired. Was, okay, Andrew, well, you don't get to photograph the sky anymore. Hold on, where did it go? All right. I'm like, I don't get to photograph the sky. I talk to myself all the time when I'm out shooting. I don't know about you guys. And I'm like, nope, no more sky. But you can use the sky in different ways. So this was the first image I did when I gave myself that strict rule of no more sky. All right, well, I'll show you. I'm going to show the sky, but just in a different way. And so this is a really nice photograph of sort of visual rhythm and pattern. And one of the things that I really like about this, so I'm out shooting and the sky's going crazy and it's sunrise. We'll talk about the importance of sunrise in a bit, but I'm like, I gotta shoot the sky. I'm like, no. You're not shooting the sky. So I came up with this idea, and I loved it. It's just such a delicate scene with a lot going on. People's eye moves sort of through the open areas of the lily pads, and then they see the clouds and they realize that's a reflect. Is that what? What is that? That's a reflection. And then I've used sort of the arrowhead reeds at the bottom. They just kind of create some anchor at the bottom there, kind of holds your eye into the scene as well too. And so this was a real unexpected surprise for me how well this worked out. When you're focusing on a shot like this, it can be difficult because you're zooming in, your depth of field, your plane of focus gets more limited the more you come in tight. And I have a little rule that I use. It's just really simple. It's F18, a third into the scene. I know that's really fancy and technical, but what I would do in a shot like this is I'd make sure I would, so if we think of, we have the plane of focus going up the image like that, if you can see my mouse, I'd go up about a third and I'd find something to lock onto, and it would have been the top of this arrowhead somewhere in here. And I would have shot that at f18. And then as you can see, it's nice and sharp all the way through. Um, One other thing I'll mention is, because I shoot for large format prints, I don't like to crop after. So this wasn't like a crop of like a big image. I'm really particular with getting it right in the camera. And I used to shoot 4x5 film, and now obviously that was a long time ago, but you had to get it right in the camera. And that discipline, I think, is part of the craft, right? It's part of becoming as good as you can. Like if you're a golfer, you're going to practice putts till the sun sets, you know. But that's just because you want to get really good at your craft, right? And you want to be able to do it on automatic, autopilot. So when the light's happening quick, and when things are changing, like you just boom, 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 your camera isn't even in the way. You don't think about the ISO, you don't think about the aperture, you just know. And so I want to get to that point with my equipment where it's just, I just know. I can focus, I can concentrate on the subject, the lighting, the composition, and I just know it's F18, third in the scene, boom, boom, set it up. Okay, now that's out of the way. You know, obviously we're shooting at low ISOs here, and you know, I'm on a tripod. Like I'm not, even if my shutter speed was, it's not happening. I'm never off a tripod when I'm shooting for art. Okay, when I know there's a chance this might get enlarged and become big, I'm always on that tripod. Sure, I have fun and walk around. Like one of the things I love to do these days, and I call it sketching with my cell phone. I'll just, while I'm scouting locations, so let's say I show up, it's middle of the day because that's usually not a good time for shooting mostly. And so what are you going to do in the middle of the day? Well, I'm gonna look for composition opportunities. I got my maps out, my GPS, whatever it is. I'm looking for light. And where's the light going to be at the end of the day? Where's it going to be in the morning? Side lighting, backlighting, whatever. And I'll just walk. I'll explore, and I'll find my compositions. And one of the things, you know, when we're shooting like that, especially for grand landscape, we'll talk a lot about some of that's kind of my signature, the big near far compositions. You know, the sky is going to be what the sky is going to be, and you can hope for the best. Where you have control over is your midground and your foreground, and particularly I think it's the foreground that is the most important part of starting a grand landscape composition. So I give a lot of time to my foreground, and just finding spots where I can have a great start. And so why don't we hop into, let's go here, and we'll go down these ones here, and we'll talk a little bit about that, okay? I mean, there's a lot to this photo personally. And maybe I'll bring it up because we're, you know, up here in the north, I'm sort of in hibernation mode a little bit through the winter. I don't do a ton of winter photography. It's just not a time that it's hard to access places. I mean, we get a lot of snow. So you know, I have some fun on my snowshoes, but I just kind of take a break. I take a creative break. I focus on my other business, my printing company. And then when the spring starts to come, I kind of like to plan a creative, kind of a creative direction for the year. So this year, because after seeing the success of, and I'll show you the image before we end, of one of my black and white images, which I don't do a ton of it, but unexpected success of it. It was my best-selling piece at my last show. I've got a series of black and whites I'm going to work on. So I'm kind of excited about that. I like to have a creative goal for the year, and I would recommend to all of you that you think about that. Sure, you're going to react to situations that come up. You're going to react to light, weather. Great, fine. But I think you should have a creative plan for the year. And you know, we're talking 4, 6, 8 images, maybe to build in that sort of portfolio. Hey, you know what? I really want to get shots of this. Okay. Research it. What can I bring to that? How can I put my own stamp on it? And I'm going to make an effort of doing that. So this one here was last spring, and I was really struggling creatively. I mean, I had been shooting for 2 days up in Lake Superior and nothing. I mean, it was like the shoes were two sizes too small. Couldn't, everything felt awkward. I just couldn't get anything to work. The weather was really windy. It was really difficult. I was getting super frustrated. Um, then on the third day, this happened. And what happened here was it was just what I needed. I mean, this is low-hanging fruit. This is just a really nice sunset. It was calm. I could see what was coming, and I said, oh boy, okay, it's coming. So you better get your act together and figure this out. And I saw this little river leading in, and I said, this is just so perfect, like so easy, you know. So I set up and I shot it, and it's I call it speak to me because really it was like, okay, Andrew, here you go. This is your start. This is just an easy shot for you. We're gonna make it. You just a little lob over the net, keep it in bounds, and you're good. And then after this shot, I swear the floodgates opened. It was like, okay, I'm back. And this is really fun because that's all it took. Let me show you what started to come of that from that shoot. I think some really really cool. This image here, I love this. One of my favorites from this year. And so this was kind of the next day. And the reason I love this is I like to take just a simple, unordinary, scruffy little juniper bush sitting on a rock and like build a story around it. And this is called resilience. And I think we can all appreciate in our lives times when we've had to, draw upon resilience. And I certainly was drawing upon some resilience the last few days on this shoot. And I saw this juniper, and it just, I obviously knew the direction of the light it was going to shoot into. And and sure, it's not the most glamorous sunset. But the juniper on the rocks and the way the shape of the rocks start to point you into the scene, and then the sun that draws you into the background, and the whole story of resilience. I mean, this juniper is going to be decades old, and it sat there on Lake Superior looking west. I mean, it has gotten some storms. It's been beat up the winter. And I just kind of love the story behind this. So I shot this piece and just wanted to write about it, and I knew the title when I shot it. And I just kind of like, this is the granite, this is the shoreline, this is sort of iconic Superior shoreline where I'm from. The colorful moss on the rocks, that's all natural. I mean, it just tells the story of a beautiful, biologically diverse landscape. And then this little guy just hanging in there. So I went off on sort of a creative tangent up there once I got that easy one out of the way. And and I think a lot of times, for us as artists, it's all kind of, it can be mental, right? Like you need to quiet your mind to open it to hear what visually you're, this is going to sound weird, to hear what visually you're seeing. Okay. I mean, hear what you're seeing. Hold on a minute. What does he mean by that? Well, there's shape and form and interesting things everywhere. And a lot of times when we're too busy in our head or we're too frustrated or whatever, we walk right by it, you know. And this is an image I haven't printed yet, but I kind of like it. It was again me turning my back to the obvious sunset that's going on off the image in the right there, and just thinking about shape and form. And I love the I wanted the shoreline, and I love the shape and form of this. And then I kind of like the way it just gradually goes from right to left with the color and subdues. And I'm quite pleased with this shot. But again, it was just not necessarily just paying attention to what I reacted to. And I reacted to the way the rocks were flowing into the water, and I like the color behind it as well too. I think it's a less obvious story, but I think it's a little more interesting than if I had just included that sunset. Now I have all these notes I was going to talk about, and I don't want to miss out. But where are we for time right now? 9:20. Okay. Let's keep
Yeah.
going.
Just a few more minutes. Yeah, maybe 10 minutes, 10, 15 more minutes.
Sure. Okay. And then we could have
And
some
then,
questions, all right?
yes,
Oh, I did
yes. I've got,
I did talk about the black and white. So let me share with you this one here because this was very unexpected for me. I'm a color shooter. I mean, that's what I like to do. And this was the spring, and I'm up at the river near where I live, called the Oxtongue River. And it was just green and gray rocks. I mean, there was no, I thought we were going to get a little color coming up in the sky there, but it didn't happen. So sometimes, it's about light and atmosphere and subject matter, and that's it. And so it doesn't have to always be color. This has all that light and atmosphere and subject matter. So I photographed this, and it was kind of a revenge photo. And I know that sounds funny, but I was shooting with my buddy Dana, and he was doing like this wine, all this stuff, and he posted them on his Facebook, and he was like, Dana likes to sort of exaggerate and post a little bit, and with his color, and I'm like, okay, Dana, fine. If you're gonna be like that, then I'm doing the opposite, and I'm getting a black and white one out here because there was no color there, and so sure enough, but this one sold I probably sold 8 of them at that show, like in a nice 3 foot by 3 foot square size. It was incredible. People just, all that hard work I did to get those color images, they just wanted this black and white revenge accident photo. And it makes me chuckle because you just never know sort of what's going to respond, what people are going to respond to. There's no way to predict it. There just isn't. And so that's where, as if you're looking at selling your photography as artwork, you have to get out and show your work. And because that's how you can hear what people respond to, right? I mean, sure, we're all going to get like on the Instagram because it's so easy to like. It's a lot harder to like it by buying it, as you all know. I mean, if we had a nickel for every like, right? But when people start buying them, you're like, okay, you're onto something. You know, that's the best feedback you can get. So that's why I'm going out shooting more this spring. But with my luck, it'll be okay. They're onto something different this year. It won't be black and white. It'll be something different. But that's fun. That's okay. All right. So let me talk a little bit about this area here. Okay. So this summer, I was obsessed with this location. All right. This is a hike in Algonquin. And this is where the one place in Algonquin I get to use my wide angle lens. And it's off a trail called Centennial Ridges. And you can see the composition. It's spectacular, right? Like it's beginning, it's middle, it's ending. I mean, that sky, that has the potential to do a lot. That lake in the midground, it naturally points your eye to the setting sun. And look at the foreground. I mean, my word, it's like somebody put that rock there, and then we can like frame it with some pine trees and a little spruce. I'm like, this is gold. So I just hiked, and it's an hour hike up. It's a big deal. It's to get there. It's an hour and a half drive, hour hike up, and then you got to get back. But the best part about it is it's sunset, so there's never anybody there at sunset because there's an hour hike out in the dark through the woods. And it kind of became this thing for me, and it became this obsession. And I just went up there probably 20 times this year. So this is one shot. I like it. Like it's nice, but it's not as good as it could be. It's a photograph that's really nicely composed. It's not artistic. Okay. There's more that can be done here through atmosphere and through light. And so that became my quest. And through this quest, as I said, probably 20 times, I it also became a pilgrimage for me. It became a just something I would start to really enjoy the exercise of the hike, getting up there with my equipment. It's uphill, obviously, and the walking out in the dark became this sort of game of my mind and what is imagining happening in the woods with all the bears and the wolves and the moose, and they're all going to be chasing me at the same time in about 2 seconds, to like what the reality was of it's me in the woods, and I'm like just as supposed to be here, just like them. We are nature, right? And of course, actually saw a couple of moose. I've seen a few bear, but none of them wanted anything to do with me. It's more my imagination. But this is a very interesting piece, and we're starting to get a little more with the atmosphere happening here, a little more sort of painterly feel to it, where we've got some mist in the background coming in, settling in on the cool lakes. And this is a piece that sold very well for me as well too. It was kind of my only vertical from this year, and that's one thing too. When you're selling art, you sort of want to think about where people use them in the size and of course our aspect ratios. And people kind of like the long, narrow, horizontal. They like that 2-to-1 aspect ratio. 3:2 is okay. And vertical, not as much. But this was my one vertical, but this sold really well. Verticals work great in sort of like 3 feet height, seems to be 3 to 4 feet height. So there's another shot from that location, right? The same area, different composition. And then we get to this piece. Which one do I want to show you? Okay, I'll show you this one first. So this is on that same ridge line. Sorry, this is not my final edited piece. It's a little dull looking from the final edit. I don't have that on this computer, but this is called Connect My Soul. This again, what I'm trying to message here is iconic landscape for my area: rocks, water, trees, granite, pine, white pine, lakes, and really that's all I wanted out of this. It was a perfectly still evening. You can see the reflection in the water. That gives it that next level of interest, okay? But otherwise, it's kind of a nice sunset picture, but with great subject matter and a little bit of visual interesting happening. This one also has done very well for me. I think it's easy to look at. I'm not trying to complicate people's lives with my artwork and make it unsettling or anything like that. What I do is just nice pictures of our natural world. And that's really what I'm trying to do. And the final piece that really brought it all together for me from up there was this one here. And this one was my last shoot. It took that long to get this combination of atmosphere and light. And this is called My Place of Power. And this was shoot number 20 from this location. September. Storm. It was raining at my house and it just stormed. So when there's action in the weather and I see stuff coming and going and clouds moving and I want to get out there. So I went up here and literally this kind of unfolded. And for me, it's like the perfect example of don't give up on a location. It will reward you. It may take 20 times. It may take the first time. But you will get rewarded and your effort will be worth it. And the good thing is when you get there, you've been there so much, you know what to do. There's no guessing. So I know the composition, I know where to put my tripod and it's all about light and atmosphere. So that being said, I gotta like show you this one. So this is my one wildlife photograph and it's my only wildlife photograph because I'll never take a better wildlife photograph. So it's done. And this was so accidental. So I was set up in the bog, I was shooting frost in October, and this guy walks into my scene. And it was he paid my mortgage for years, this one. It just became this beautiful photo of a moose with antlers in the fall, fog coming through. And the light was perfect. So this is all luck though, guys. This was like accidental. And the harder the saying, the harder we work, the luckier we become, right? I mean, it's so true. And the last thing I got to do is I'll just share with you. It's where do we get online, especially, you're going to see a lot of the same photographs, aren't you? Like it's people go for trophies. All right. So it's that red maple tree or whatever it is. And those are fun to do. Those are great. Lots of fun. But I mean, so how do we like be unique in our approach? I mean, because, sort of everything's been done before. How do we shoot differently? I don't know if we need to necessarily take inspiration from photographers. We can take inspiration from any visual artist. And I'm going to show you a piece here. In my early day when I started, when I was struggling to shoot Algonquin Park and understanding how to capture it, I was looking at the work of the Group of Seven, who are famous Canadian painters. Some of you may have heard that, maybe not, but anyways, they're very well known. Early 1900s, they were painting, and basically they veered away from the European style of Impressionism, and created their own sort of look. But they painted in the area where I like to shoot, and this is Tom Thompson and the Jack Pine. And if you look at this, this is Algonquin Park. He's taken some artistic liberty with the size of the hills, but that's okay. And what he's done is he's kind of compressed the distance here, hasn't he? He's like brought those mountains in the background, or the hills in the background, in. He's also like put a strong tree in the foreground. Now it's on the right third, and he's chopped the top of it off. Well, this is interesting because I was showing the tops of my trees. I'm like, well, okay, that explains why, I had uninteresting sky on that. So by studying the work of Group of Seven, who solved the compositional problems that I was facing in my area, which was mainly a big, messy wilderness, they solved it through their painting. Maybe I can be inspired to do that with my work. And so the first photograph that came from that and became my best-selling piece for years was this one. So you can sort of see it's inspiration, not imitation. And I think that's the message I like to get across to photographers is like, try to like look at this, what's been solved by others and how can you utilize that in your work? Not necessarily exactly copying them, but hey, did they bring the background in? Did they chop the top of their trees off? Or how did they approach that? And so that's what I did with this piece. And this piece is a signature piece from Algonquin, actually called Algonquin. And again, you can see how I've layered tone. This is a zoom lens that's brought everything in, but it's also very much beginning, middle, end, and rule of thirds as sort of my structure. So, guys, I've talked a lot right tonight, and I know I've probably forgot some things I wanted to tell you, but I'm sure there's lots here that we can discuss. I'm happy to answer questions and anything about the business of art, selling art, printing. I own a fine art printing company. We do a lot of the printing for other photographers. Now, we're located in Toronto in Canada, but I have a lot of understanding, of course, about printing, and you have questions about paper or whatever it is. I'll let you
Great.
open it up.
Okay, so let me ask you to take your screen down and I'm going to hit you with some questions. You ready?
Stop sharing. Yep.
Yeah, stop sharing. Okay.
That's what my teacher used to tell me in middle school.
Stop sharing. All right, here we go. Let's start with some of the easy ones.
Okay.
Kathy wants to know, and I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. Do you always label or create a name for each of your photos?
No.
You don't?
No,
Answer.
no, because not all of them are gonna make it. I call them
Okay.
wall worthy. If it's wall worthy, it's getting a story and a name.
Okay. That's fair.
Otherwise, it's
Um,
just like, no, I can't. You'd run out like, what are we, River One, River 2019. There's only so much inspiration.
that just sounds like an underachiever's attitude, Andrew. Okay. Donna's question is, do you focus stack your landscape images?
No,
Okay.
no, F18, a third into the scene gets it done.
Okay.
Now, the
Um,
reason I don't focus stack, okay, like I
mhm.
hate having to spend a lot of time after the fact.
Sure.
So if I can get
Sure.
in and out of my image in 10 minutes, I'm thrilled. So if you learn how to focus, there's not a lot of need to do it. Sure, I could get maybe technically more perfect in the background. What I do use and have used a lot of are tilt shift lenses. And that basically is like instant focus stack because you control the plane of focus and you can move it from the front to the back and everything's in the same plane of focus. Those lenses are limited in their focal length, so they're not appropriate for every scene. But no, I don't. The other thing is I shoot with a big camera, lots of, and starting to focus stack, like my files are over 100 megabytes out of the camera. It just gets ridiculous to deal with the file sizes. Yeah.
Are you using the Fuji? What are you using?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Okay.
GFX system.
Okay.
Changed my
Um, I'm
that
sorry.
Fuji's changed my life with the way just they're film simulations. I can shoot Velvia. I used to shoot that in my large format. And then you literally have like almost no Photoshop work to do.
Okay. Carolyn's question is, do you edit in Lightroom? What do you use for your
Yeah,
editing?
mostly Lightroom. Sometimes then into Photoshop. But I Lightroom's so good now. I like Lightroom Classic. Um,
Okay.
it's just I get everything pretty much from there that I need.
Okay. She does say, I have many questions about printing, and she wants to know if she can email you those questions.
Yes,
Okay.
she can.
Um,
Yeah, that's
okay.
probably a good idea.
Okay. Would you mind putting your email address in the chat and she can grab it from there? Or better yet, I bet it's on your website. Is
Yeah,
that
you
correct?
can contact me through my website for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's send people there so that way they get a little bit of you get a little bit of traffic and then they get to look at some of the photos on your
Oh, there's lots more in there.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Famika's question is how did you get started displaying and selling your work?
Well, I just had to pay the bills and I had to do something. And literally that was it. I mean, I just started. It was that was the business person in me. So I'm kind of unique that way where I have an artistic half, but I also have a business half. And I just said like, I need a product at a price that people are willing to pay for. And
Mm,
literally that was as unartistic as that sounds, it kind of what it breaks down to. So I knew I had some nice photos. I knew people need art. Well, why not mine? Right. So I made up some
that's right.
big ones and literally signed up for an art show and failed miserably the first year because I had all the wrong sizes at first. But then I learned and I went back to the drawing board and I redid and I started doing big. And what really took off for me was the big canvas prints in the early mid 2000s. Those became really popular. I actually got to the point where I was making them all myself in my basement, like cutting the wood, joining the frame, like the whole thing, stretching them. And that's how I got into printing. But it's you just start selling. You just go and you show and you sign up for art shows. Those are really great. So you can get some real simple ones like art in the park for a few $100s for a booth, but then you need a whole booth. You need walls to hang. It's a whole process, you know. It
Yeah.
starts to, but or you could approach galleries, but galleries, they're going to look at it like unless they can make some good money from it and sell it for thousands, they're not going to do it. The other thing I did was because I was printing all my own and making finished products in my basement, like big canvas prints, I started to approach interior designers. And that really got me into some big jobs. The first big job I got was 200 large canvas prints, 200 for a big hotel up here. I mean, in my basement. Like this is craziness. But I had nothing to do all winter because that's when there's not much going on in my business in my part of the world.
Photography. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was able to focus on printing in that. So, anyways, that's kind of it. You just I don't know. People can go viral online and sure sell some prints, but most of the artists that we print for and photographers we print for at Print Partner, they're actually selling in physical locations. They're selling at shows, selling at some have their own galleries, some have galleries that rep them. And of course, then there's the camera clubs. People want to print for their competitions, and some sales happen through there. But I think you just gotta price. You have to think of it like you're launching a product, right? What size? Okay. How am I going to do it? How am I going to make the product? What am I going to print on? How much am I going to sell it for? Like there's a lot, to come through and to figure out. It's more than I can answer and just this, but you just do it. But I had to make it work. I didn't really have a plan B.
This was a good plan A. So Anne's question is, let me read her story. She says, as a person who is starting to have a collection of images I'd like to print, I would love a program on what the current options and considerations are. She said many years ago she did have a wet dark room, but she wants to know about the modern options. Do you have a quick and
Yeah.
easy?
Probably one of the hottest, like I showed you that video in my booth, those were all on metal. Okay. So that's become quite popular. And so, like, It's not as expensive as having them framed under glass. You can go really big. We do 4 feet by 8 feet metal sheets for people sometimes. You can go really big. They're light. They last 75 to 100 years. They're rated more than what people will need them for. And it's a really kind of modern presentation. So and metal comes in like a few different finishes, gloss, semi, and matte. I would for landscape like what I did, what you saw there would only ever be gloss or semi, not the matte finish. And then of course, there's still a lot of people are just kind of taking a nice fine art print and mounting it to a substrate, laminating it. That's popular as well too right now. So those two formats seem to be, and that there is always the traditional frame photographic print. You have to also think of your client. So where are they displaying it, right? If it's in a home, that's different. If it's in a corporate environment, it needs to be durable. You can't just have like it can't just be canvas or something. I mean, so that's where the metal really lends itself there as well too. And if somebody has kind of a traditional home that's kind of like warm and cozy, they probably won't want the metal, They might like a nice frame print or maybe like a traditional frame print or maybe even something on canvas as well too. So it's not sort of a one answer, but metal are we would sell 60% of our sales are on metal. So definitely popular.
Okay, so the second part of her question, and if you said it, I missed it. Are art show booths your main way of selling your work?
Well, that's how I built my clients. Okay. And
Yeah.
and and I think that's the key. I was out there in front of people, meeting them, seeing them each year at the same show, then buying more pieces. And eventually you get to a point where it can kind of sustain itself a
Mhm.
little better. You have, for lack of a better word, collectors, I guess, people who enthusiasts, probably for me, because it's not really it's not, these aren't tens of thousands of dollars, right? This is not, you don't put my art on your balance sheet. It's just really nice. And so let's call it enthusiast. I also kind of pick a lane for myself, right? Like I'm not trying to pretend that I'm somebody that I'm not. And certainly with my subject matter, I'm not changing the world with it. And I think if you want to if you want to make an impact with your photography, like on a global impact or maybe on a social impact, you have to show your time through your lens. And that's where journalistic photography, war areas, different things like that really get the news, because it's our time through the lens, what's happening. With me, it's just more sort of like really nice art for your house. Just looks good. People like it. If you like nature, some people don't like nature. They're like, why would I want trees in my house? They want architect. I don't know. Like it's so you just kind of, I don't try to be all things to all people.
Yeah. This is still part of Anne's questions. I think your Fuji is 100 megapixels, but her question is, how many megapixels are you using for your large images?
Yeah. So when I started going large, I was using a 15 megapixel camera. So that's where technique comes in. This is where, like what I talked about technique on a tripod, focus properly. I always bought the best lenses I could, always the professional line of lenses, because that was sort of more important than the actual camera. And then, of
Mhm.
course, I went to 25 megapixels and I was able to do very nice 40 by 60s off that. If shot right, if processed right, you have to understand sharpening per output. You have to understand the material you're printing on and how to coax the best out of it. Some material's forgiving, some isn't. And so there's a lot that goes into, but every camera today is capable of doing most of the sizes you're ever going to need in your photograph if you shoot it properly.
Okay. Mika's question is, do you stick to 300 DPI minimum for your large prints?
No, no, actually will go down. And that's how so that sounds a little bit counterproductive. What do you mean go down when you're going larger? Well, you can go to 150 DPI and you will not, I would print 150 DPI to 300 DPI and tell me if you can see the difference. We can talk about the theoretical difference. Of course there is. There's theoretical difference there. There's scientific difference. But if we can't see it, does it make a difference?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one of those questions. So 150s, like on canvas 150, I can get away with. I would not do that a metal or sort of maybe a gloss paper or something, I would go to 240.
Okay.
And I would process in 16-bit, push all my pixels around, like I'm shooting raw, of course. But then when I print, I'll print in 8-bit. Because if you size, like you're getting into gigabyte size files, if you do, it just becomes unmanageable. You just don't, if you have very smooth blues and very smooth grays, like really, really tight gradients, that's when sometimes you can start to see it degrading a bit. But it's sort of, that's kind of the only time I would think it would come up. Just kind of a messy nature scene or an architecture, whatever. You're not going to see any breaking down in the gradients as well. But so that's just kind of like, I know you wanted to hear 300 or maybe 360, but it's just not, it's so big. It's not necessary. Mostly it's not. 240 will be my go-to. Um, that way I
Okay.
know, like out of my camera, if I print at 240, I get a 3648 without any resing, up resing. Like,
Okay.
okay, so I'm usually going down, right?
Interesting.
But
All right.
it's going to go against what they talk about. But I've been printing, I own a professional photo lab. I mean, we print probably 20,000 photos a year. I know a thing or two about what we can talk about and then what's reality. And so, like, if you're printing on fine art paper, it sucks the ink in. You get something called diffusion through that, and it's softening everything, anyways, right? And so, and if you're printing on canvas, it's like that. It's only when you start printing on gloss papers for like face mounted acrylic process, where the ink sits on top, that you have to be a little more careful with that. But for the average paper that people are printing on, it's kind of like, think of it like, an eyedropper of color going in a glass of water. It's kind of spreading out as it goes on the paper anyways. So,
So I'm going to ask this question because I'm thinking a few people are wondering, and somebody's put something in here. Some of the classes that your workshops that you teach, do you do a printing
well, I
class?
have. I'm not doing them right now. I've just been through a merger with another company, and we've doubled the size of our printing business. And it's like there's no workshops for the next year.
Okay.
Um, but it's interesting that you say that. I mean, like there's so much. If you reached out to my company, so my company, I said I have nothing to sell, but it's printpartner.ca. Okay. We have things called image consultants there. If you reach out to us and you want to talk about how an image is going to look and print, look, feel free to do it. You're not obligated to buy anything, and we'll just kind of give you some feedback on it if you want. If you want to learn how to print yourself, so buy your own printer and do it, that's a whole nother ball game. If you're looking like, and that's, I'm sure there's lots of online courses for that. There must be. Yeah, there'll be a
There
lot.
are. There
Yeah.
are. I was just wondering if you were doing it. Because
No,
I'm
I can't.
I'm getting a little bit of peer pressure in the comments about get him back. Get him to come
Oh,
back.
do you know I would
So
love, listen, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I have
please let
I have two files called Camera Club presentation,
uh-huh.
and I didn't know that they were different. I'm at my home and my office is in Toronto. The real Camera Club presentation is sitting on my desktop in Toronto. And I get here
Don't be
and I knew, but I have a file in this computer called Camera Club presentation. No, it's not this one. And so I'm winging it tonight.
That's okay. But and you winged well. I'll just
Yeah,
say that.
it's a
I knew
computer.
that, but yeah,
You knew I
you
was
were
winging it.
I did. I did. We talked a
Huh?
little bit about
Oh,
your yeah,
right,
you
right,
did.
right. Okay.
Yeah. Um, but it's all about
Well, we could
content
go
and
so much
expression.
deeper into some of this stuff.
I know, I know. So that means that you need to come back so that we can see your fancy presentations,
Well,
options. So yeah, I'm just getting a lot of pressure from the people in the room, like get him back here. So I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'll put you on the spot later. Okay,
so
so
here's
there was
my deal to you. You guys
oh,
decide where you want to go deeper on. Give me a little direction.
sure.
I'm off. I'm happy. You know.
There was one more question in here. Okay, last question. Carolyn, I think you're going to hear from Carolyn Cummings, probably at gmail.com. She's got lots of questions.
Okay.
Okay, it's not, I guess it's a question. F18, 1/3 into the scene. Her question is high ISO. That's the question mark. What's your
Mm.
ISO?
Well, so I'm always shooting at the lowest ISO possible. Okay, that makes
Okay.
sense. So sometimes we
Yep.
have rustling leaves. These days, you could shoot. I shot this image at 4,000 ISO this year as like just like, and it was awesome. I was like, good Lord. Like, but I'm always trying to shoot at ISO on the Fuji, it's 80 or Nikon Canon, I'm sure, I think it's 100. I'm around there up to 400, maybe up to 400. So the thing is quality first, always for me. Um, and so I'll shoot at ISO 100, sometimes two. But the cameras are so good today, and the software is so good at like fixing it after the fact. It's like
Yeah.
some of this stuff is left over from, like 2008 when ISO 400 was like, oh, no, don't do it.
Do it. ISO is very scary. Okay. Andrew, those were, I think I got all the questions. If I didn't, I apologize.
No problem.
I'm going to thank you for giving us your time and your experience. And I
My
will take
pleasure.
you up on that
Yeah.
uh, willingness to come back and do another presentation for us. Um, I will go through the comments, people. I see them.
We
You
have
guys,
some very exciting things happening
oh
because
yeah,
of this merger in my printing business. So
all right,
what I would, yeah, and I think we're very close to opening a US location as well. So,
great.
but we're really art printers. We're not like, and I know that's who I'm talking to, this group here. Um, but if you follow me on Instagram, this time of year, you're not going to see a lot happening, or Facebook, you can follow me there. But I start to post a lot more in the nice weather when I'm shooting more. But then when I make these announcements about printing or anything about that, you're gonna get notified as well too. So if you're interested in that.
It just seems like Andre Collett needs to.
I love
That's a
it.
private. That's an inside joke, people. Needs to work on a newsletter because they think your newsletter would be a really big
You know how
hit.
much work that needs to be done right now for all sorts of things in my life?
And that just sounds like
And
a
you're
lot of
adding
wine.
more to it.
I know,
I can't
whining
I can't
excuses.
get through my inbox. It's like, and now you want me to start writing newsletters. But sure. Okay.
I'm just planting the seed. I'm just planting the seed. Okay, Andrew, let me thank you for doing tonight's presentation for us
Thank you, Linda.
and offering a lot of advice and showing
I
us
know it
some
happened quick. I
beautiful
threw a lot
pictures.
at you. Hopefully you got one or two things, and then we'll do this again. I don't mind. That would be great.
Okay. Okay. So next week, Doug Gephardt will share his presentation, Small Town Tours, Day Trips Destined to Inspire. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you again soon.